So we have a really wonderful panel here today, great group. And as I mentioned in the opening, this morning is all about sort of networking, working as a network. And I think all of our panelists in different ways represent sort of how to work as a network. And they're all working in kind of different areas of the food system. So they're covering issues of economics, the environment, racial equity, healthcare and food access. But I think there's also a lot of overlap. None of these things are exclusively about just the environment, or just the economy, or just equity, or just access. And so there's a lot of interconnections between what we're going to hear amongst all of the panelists today. And with that, our first up is Alyssa White from the Gunn Institute for Environment, and Stephen Leslie of Cedar Mountain Farm and Cobb Hill Cheese, which, can we confirm that Stephen is here? Is Stephen here? Yes, okay, I'm seeing it, yes. Great. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over now to Alyssa. I'm gonna stop this screen share so that she can take the controls, which I assume she has. And we're just so excited and pleased for all of you as panelists joining us here today. So thank you once again. All right. It's all yours, Alyssa.
Great. Hi, everybody. So excited and grateful to be here. Just share screen. Can you see that?
We can. It's not in slideshow.
It's about to be in slideshow. Okay, great. I had some fun with PowerPoint and explored. There are some really great transitions in there. I didn't put the most fun ones in, but I thought that was a great starter. Since we're connecting over a virtual format, maybe those are ways to just like lighten the mood a little bit and connect a little bit. So I encourage anyone who has a presentation later to play with that. You can turn your whole page into like an origami bird. Anyways, good morning, everyone. So as Jake said, my name is Alyssa White. I know many of you, and I'm currently a postdoctoral research associate at the University of Vermont. I work with the Gunn Institute for Environment, and I work really closely with UVM Extension. So grateful for this opportunity to connect with everybody at Farm to Plate, and I'm excited to talk about one of the projects that I've been working on over the last year, and to share this opportunity with Stephen Leslie from Cedar Mountain Farm. And I just also want to acknowledge that Heather Darby is my mentor at UVM, and she is really instrumental in making this project possible. So the project that I'm going to talk about is called the State of Soil Health in Vermont, and it's a collaborative effort to understand where we are at now, where we're starting from in terms of soil health in Vermont. And there are so many conversations about the benefits of healthy soils, the need to improve soil health, but without knowing where we are now, it's hard to chart a path forward. So the vision for this project was to generate useful information that would be of interest to farmers, information that could also inform policy conversations, and information that could maybe inform climate action and stewardship, both locally, but really beyond as well. So big vision. Our goals were to establish a baseline of soil health indicators. So those things that we can measure about soil health, and in particular, the indicators of ecosystem services like soil carbon stocks in agricultural soils and climate resilience. And we sought to establish some shared standards for soil sampling so that we could compare information from different projects. We also hope to interpret that information in ways that reflect the contextual needs of farmers. And we hope to just support more collaboration and synergy across different people and projects, soil health. And then finally, we also wanted to just build greater capacity for measuring soil carbon and soil health within the community, given that there's just so much more interest there. So those were our goals, and a lot of people have been involved and contributed in different ways. It's collaboration that made this possible, and I know it's cliche, but it really is teamwork that made this dream work and possible. One of the most interesting and valuable aspects of this project that I want to share with you today is the story of the collaboration behind it. There's a lot of things I could tell you about this project, but I think that's the most valuable to the network, because I think our approach to generating kind of shared metrics and collaboration could be applicable to other topics and communities of interest. So as a first step, for this project, I reached out to everyone that I knew of who was working on soil health on farms, projects that were measuring soil health anywhere in the state. I put out the word through the Soil Health Policy Network, and I asked just everybody that I knew who was working on this to get together and to talk about potentially measuring some of the same things across all these different projects so that we could compare our results and share some insights at like a larger scale. So we did that. That was UVM Extension, a number of different projects that UVM Extension was running, conservation districts, the Agency of Agriculture's Vermont Environmental Stewardship Program. There was a project out of Dartmouth College that was measuring soil health as well. So we got a few meetings together and we came to consensus about what we could all measure within our existing projects. But what's interesting, I think, about our model is that it's not a project that had like a direct dedicated funding at its inception. So it's different than some other kind of research projects in that it didn't happen because we got a grant or we had specific base funding. It was a group with shared interests and willingness to each contribute a little bit more to what they were doing to create something bigger than the sum of like all the separate things that we were doing. So we didn't have base funding and everyone donated a little of their time. The Gund donated my time to help coordinate, and all of the partners have committed something to make this possible. So for many of them, it was just the extra time and effort to take more measurements. And once we had this vision for a baseline assessment and a committed group of collaborators, we found other partners who heard about it and stepped up and offered to pitch in other resources that they had to expand certain pieces of what we were doing. So for example, Marley Roop from the DEC was able to find some funds to do more soil health testing on fields around Lake Carmi. So that expanded our sample scope a little bit. And then Ben and Jerry's was super interested in like the biological aspects of soil health. So they helped us buy some equipment to be able to measure biological activity in the samples that were collected. We had a partner at Dartmouth who was involved because they were measuring a few fields, and they offered to measure the proportions of mineral and particulate associated carbon fractions in all the samples, which is going to be super interesting. And at one point, we looked at the map of all the farms that we were reaching and we realized that we weren't getting the whole state because this is kind of a convenient sample, right? So it just happened that we had a conversation with the Nature Conservancy around that time that aligned with that realization, and they responded and they gave us some small but very crucial funding and support to be able to reach other portions of the state and other types of farms that were kind of missing from what we had already. And then we were able to also purchase some sampling equipment. And so, you know, this allowed us something that could have been kind of simple built into something really big and exciting. So, you know, it's a convenient sample of existing projects, but with all of people's little contributions combined, we have something really substantial, 206 fields across the whole state that have all measured this cache soil health test. We've taken over 550 bulk density cores, which are really hard to do in some cases. We have biological analysis on most of the fields and some other fun stuff. So what we measured, just to give you like a little insight there, a lot of different things. On the left is like all the different indicators or metrics we measured. And I'm not going to read through all of them because that will just take too much time, but they tell us some really interesting things in terms of kind of ecosystem function or ecosystem services. So we'll be able to kind of build some bigger, some findings and insights at the statewide scale about soil health, you know, and how those things relate to resilience to extreme weather, climate resilience, some new insights around biological diversity and carbon permanence. And so what we're doing is exciting, but it's really, I think, just one piece of a bigger puzzle. And hopefully it will lead to more informed decisions about climate mitigation and resilience, but we're not capturing everything. Like we don't get the greenhouse gas emissions from the soil surface. So it feels like a start, but it's exciting. And so all of the collaborators are really excited about the larger scale insights we can gain from this spatial extent of sampling. So for example, here's just some preliminary information that we've got about soil carbon stocks and agricultural soils that I think were surprising. Like the range of potential soil carbon stocks in cornfields is really wide and variable. And so this has been useful information for both the PES working group and the state's climate action planning. And we're also starting to report back to farmers, which is exciting. The farmers are really excited about this information too. They want to see how their own soil health compares at the whole state scale. But we also know that soil texture and context influences soil health. So they're really interested to see not just how they compare at the state scale, but how their soil health compares with farms that have similar soil texture or farms that are managing in the same way. So for example, what we can do in reporting on the left here is showing 2 fields that were sampled on a farm. If you look at them on the left in comparison to the whole data set, they're just kind of the high end of the expected range. But when we break the data set down into performance by different soil texture, you can see that they really stand out. They're some of the highest organic matter content we've sampled on sandy loam soils. And so sandy soils just have a lower affinity for holding carbon. And so this is exciting for the farmers to see kind of this more like contextualized breakout of the information. So that's just some of the value that we can bring to the farmers. But of course, it's a partnership. It's not everything. And I think the farmers are really leading in a lot of aspects. So I'll just say that some farmers told me a few years ago that if they had better information about how their management decisions impacted things like carbon sequestration or greenhouse gas emissions, water infiltration, or flood mitigation, that they would use that information. And so what we've done here with this project is just start to develop that information, but we're not all the way there yet. And it's really ownership. Interpreting what the soil test data means for management for each farm just takes expertise, it takes time, it takes relationship building. And I think that means new skills and time for technical assistance and farmers too. And so, I said, I think this path forward is a partnership with farmers. The research is valuable information in some ways, but farmers are already leading the way in innovating management to enhance soil health. And I think that ideally, we want farmers to be in the driver's seat, and this work should be in service to support their decisions. So I'm really excited to dig deeper into the soil conditions and management that are associated with some of those really highest performing soils that we sampled, and asking those farmers about what they're doing and sharing those stories. So I said, I think, farmers should be in the driver's seat into what information they need, but we need to be really thoughtful about asking for that without burdening them with more to do, that all takes time. And I'm sure all of you know that most farmers don't have a ton of extra time. So maybe we need to compensate them better for their innovation, the time they spend on stewardship and working on projects like this. So with that note about farmers leading the way in understanding soil health practices, I want to introduce my friend Stephen Leslie from Cedar Mountain Farm, who has been exceptionally committed to contributing to the soil health policy conversations while he also runs a farm. So with that, if you're ready, Stephen, you can go ahead and unmute, and I'll turn it over to you. Just give him a minute.
Okay.
We gotcha. Okay.
All right. Well, I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with this amazing community of ecologically enlightened climate heroes. So thank you. My wife, Carrie Gwalt, and I have been farming in the Upper Valley since 1996. Cedar Mountain Farm is a micro dairy of 20 Jersey milking cows and a market garden. We are also partners in Cobb Hill Cheese. Our farm is located at Cobb Hill Co-housing in Heartland, Vermont, a 23 household eco village situated on 275 acres of conserved land. We practice management intensive grazing on 40 acres and make hay on 15 acres. Our 1.5 acre no-till market garden is horse and human powered. Our business model has been to remain small and diversified. The produce of our market garden, farm-raised beef, and fluid milk are all sold within 10-mile radius of the farm. We believe small, diversified, and intensively managed farms will have the flexibility and resilience to withstand the shocks and disruptions that are coming with abrupt climate change. Context is the recognition that each farm organism is unique, and that this must be reflected in the application of soil health principles in order for them to be most effective. Ultimately, understanding ecological context is about developing our own powers of observation. A starting point for considering our context is to consider what was here before humans altered it. In our context, that would mean before European settlement, as the indigenous people were practicing what we now refer to as agroecology. Going forward, we need to take the soil health of the ancient old growth forests as a measure for soil health in our region. Once we understand that historically the land has been severely degraded, we then see that our task as land managers is to adopt regenerative practices to restore and increase the carbon bank, even as we produce nutrient-dense food for our local communities. We are working to achieve soil health by practicing the 6 soil health principles in our context. Foremost among these is to minimize disturbance. By managing our farm with adaptive rotational grazing and no-till vegetable production, we have retired the moldboard plow. This year, we are taking further steps at pasture improvement by planting trees on steeply graded slopes to hold soil and provide shade, creating cow exclusion zones, and planting wetland species in saturated zones, and planting native shrubs to replace the invasive shrubs, and hard mass trees where cows do not currently get adequate shade. We see all these practices as comprising a synergy of effects to restore the totality of landscape function of the farm ecosystem. We conduct soil testing every 3 years and have seen quantifiable improvement in percentages of soil organic matter, in some cases by as much as 3%. We also observe improved rain infiltration and commensurate flood and drought resilience. Statewide soil testing will establish a baseline for standards of soil health, and we're very excited about the biological component of that too. Over time, we also begin to learn how to measure soil health through our own empirical observation of soil, plants, and livestock. In the living systems that we manage, we want to sequester and store CO2 because that is more soil organic matter. But really what we're doing when our landscapes are functioning, when our livestock and crops are healthy, is restoring the carbon cycle. Carbon, as the basic building block of life, is the gift that must keep moving in order to remain a gift. If we practice the principles of soil health successfully in our context, use ruminants as a tool to keep pastures vegetative, keep soil covered and photosynthesizing in our row crops, all the natural cycles restore themselves and move towards equilibrium. The focus for climate mitigation in the ag and forestry sectors shouldn't be solely on sequestering CO2, but on the restoration of the soil carbon sponge. Our farm and all farms of our region are already contending with increased moisture in the form of precipitation events. At the same time, flash droughts that put hydrologic health to the test. Overall, it is warmer and the growing season is longer, but our already famously changeable New England weather has become increasingly erratic. By practicing no-till organic vegetable production and adaptive rotational grazing with elements of silvopasture, we are attempting to mimic the processes of long-term stable carbon sequestration and storage endemic to the ancient old-growth forests. Experience has shown us that if we focus first on soil health, crop yields and livestock health will follow. If organic regenerative practices are to be adopted widely, it will be a grassroots movement of forward-thinking land managers who will be the catalysts, but we can't do it alone. In this time of societal reckoning, farming is fundamental reparation. Not only does the dominant society need to address the historical and contemporary wrongs committed against BIPOC communities, but also need to repair and restore the natural world. Land managers need to be trained and supported to do this work. We must decouple organic regenerative farming from the capitalist system, or at least provide sufficient safety nets to guarantee a living wage for all farmers and farm workers engaged in organic regenerative land management. Abrupt climate change is the symptom of the fundamental rupture from nature of settlement and colonialist culture. We can't expect farmers to focus on ecological services while they're having to compete to survive in the industrial global food market. We need many more young people to work in regenerative organic land management as farmers and foresters. We must provide training and a viable career path for this fundamentally vital work of healing land and feeding local communities. Our only real wealth as a civilization is our soils. The state has a fiduciary responsibility to protect and restore our soil resources by providing a base income to land managers who can regenerate soil while producing food, fuel, fiber, building materials, and medicine. In this era of ecological collapse, Regenerative land managers are our frontline essential workers. We need progressive soil health policy reflective of a radical shift in societal priorities where soil is recognized as basic infrastructure. Vermont can lead the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alyssa and Stephen. What a wonderful opening. And yeah, and absolutely foundational as you ended with, Stephen. And so we're going to just note that we will hold on questions till the end. So if you do have some questions directly for Alyssa and Stephen, we'll get to those at the end of our presentations. And then we'll also have our dedicated breakout tables as well to have more detailed conversations. And I think, so with that, we'll transition now to Megan Brakely of the Vermont Relief Collective. And I feel compelled to mention this. This might be more embarrassing for me than you, Megan, but Megan, I know Megan from many years ago because my mom was a member of a CSA that she ran, and I used to do the pickups, and that's actually how I met Megan many years ago. So I just I wanted to acknowledge that, and it's really wonderful, kind of coming full circle to now see Megan in this capacity presenting here today at the gathering. So Megan, with that, thank you, and take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I'm gonna just share my screen here. All right, can you see some slides? Yeah,
We can.
okay. Perfect. So my name is Megan Brakely, and I serve as the agriculture organizer and treasurer for the Vermont Relief Collective. I'm one of our 8-person, very part-time organizing squad, and I've been working on farms and in education for 15 years, much of that time in the state. I wanted to shout out Relief's founder and lead organizer, whose name is Olivia Pena, who helped to create this presentation and really are the shoulders on which Relief stands. I want to pause to acknowledge the various lands on, in, and from which we make our lives and our livings. If we see land as kin and each other as caretakers and beneficiaries of this land, then we must also see and sit with the violence of the dispossession of lives, livelihoods, lands, and culture that resulted from this settler colonizer power. I acknowledge the Abenaki peoples as the original ancestral caretakers of this land for thousands of years, and that our modern existence is made morally and legally possible by willfully ignoring the fact that these lands were never ceded from the Abenaki. More information about whose lands we are on is available through this resource here, and I'll just see if I can put this in the chat too.
Megan, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it seems that your screen is getting cut off a little bit. We're not seeing the full slide. There you go. That's great. Thank you.
Oh, okay. How about, does that work? Can you still see it if I do that?
I think we can see the whole thing.
Okay. Let me go to the next one, which might be a little easier to tell. Oh, that's not a great one for an example.
Oh, that's great. Yep, that's
okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Whoop. All right, I'm skipping ahead here. So, can you still see it now? Okay, super. So the Vermont Relief Collective is a statewide network created by and for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, which is an acronym we call BIPOC in this place that we now call Vermont. It's for folks who are involved in and passionate about land, environment, agriculture, and food systems. Relief is an acronym, and these serve as our 4 focus areas. We are a membership-based organization, and we offer free membership to BIPOC Vermonters with a community of over 200 individuals right now. Our mission is to grow and support our network, and we focus on amplifying our network's voices and experiences to share a platform to develop our community and to advocate for our community's opportunities and success in Vermont and beyond. There are common myths in Vermont that there are no people of color or that people of color don't like to farm or ski. Speaking as a BIPOC person, We sometimes are also faced with the very strange duality of being both hypervisible, as in physically standing out while walking through town, or as a presence in a meeting where we might be expected to fill a certain role or offer certain perspectives or tokenized as poster faces for a company brochure despite lowly positions in a hierarchy at a company. At the same time, we're made to be invisible, spoken over, underrepresented in our media, and in the rooms where decisions are being made, and missing from our societally informed cultural imagination, or witnessing our input not actually being incorporated into practice. This whole body of rhetoric and our own cultural biases, and sometimes long, ungrounded chains of inference can be incredibly destructive and often not grounded in reality, and certainly not in a future that allows for liberation from these failures of imagination and understanding. And perhaps just as insidious as our own internalization as BIPOC of many of these biases, which prevent us from recognizing that our own individual actions and personal responsibility alone are not going to shift a system that's meant to separate, isolate, and silence us. The marginalization of BIPOC relating to land, environment, agriculture, and food is deeply rooted in the European colonization of this country, the genocide and land theft of indigenous peoples, the exploitation of kidnapped and enslaved Black people, the erasure of ancestral practices, knowledge, language, and contributions to our common stories. Historic and continued oppression and violence against BIPOC work to minimize our community's existence and its power, but we're actively working to reclaim space in the 4 focus areas to provide spaces to center community and celebrate and create our own joy. So Relief provides a space for homecoming, for support, for being seen, and sometimes for voicing individual experiences in collective fashion to realize that we're not alone. Many of us work in white-led organizations where leadership power is concentrated and institutional procedures and governance rigidly uphold this consolidation of power. Within this realm, many of our identities as complex individuals with rich, full lives and stories, as all of us hold, are sometimes most conveniently left at the door, or our physical safety requires this. In contrast, to enter into a space, a community network like Relief, knowing that you'll be understood, or in a group that will build toward understanding, knowing that conversations are starting from a place grounded in co-created community agreements. It's honestly sometimes a rarity here, but it's a real gift to be in that community. Within our membership is incredible expertise, and we seek to name, acknowledge, celebrate, and uplift our diverse membership base's unique individual contributions to create opportunities for folks to get to know each other and for us to begin thinking about our collective values, goals, and directions. Part of the work of white supremacy thinking that many of us have internalized is to mentally lump all folks with marginalized identities into one pile like BIPOC, which can sometimes serve to diminish and erase our unique experiences, gifts, and perspectives. It also glosses over the active social controls and policies that sought to divide our community into factions and pit one group against another. So we're building toward repair, collective healing, and trust. It's slow and steady and critical work before we move forward. We seek to expansively live within that paradox, celebrating our individuality and uniqueness as integral parts to our infinite whole. Our work supports relationship building, which includes really active facilitation and guidance around group agreements, boundaries, and consent-based processes, and rooted in shared stated values. Built on this critical groundwork, we share the wealth of information embodied within our community by offering free workshops led by BIPOC knowledge holders who are compensated appropriately for their time. We're building toward collective liberation, which can look really different to everyone, but keeps at the heart our interconnectedness to each other, to the land, to those who came before us, and to those who come next, and also all the stories that we tell about it. This is our lovely group of organizers. Our organizing squad acts as our quasi-volunteer steering committee and relies on the input of our membership to determine our initiatives and direction. We emphasize that every member is a leader of the collective, and we're working to build clear structures and supporting communications to allow members to actually manifest this leadership within our collective and beyond. We've been invited to this plenary panel to reflect on collaboration, partnership, and working in a networked way, how this factors into our day-to-day, how it enables us to achieve things that would not have been possible alone, and replicable tips around network generation that we can think of. I wanted to pause and reflect on what a net and a network are and what they do. Ha! Alyssa, this might be the most fun I had in the PowerPoint, finding random images off the internet. So nets are individual fibers or threads that are knotted together. And our net is comprised of unique strands from a wide array of materials. Each linkage provides strength or an opportunity to tangle, and individual threads all have their own breaking points. But at each point of interaction, each knot, there's a process choice, a thickening, and the opportunity to redistribute the weight, the work, and the load. Networks are orderly, patterned, and deliberately gain strength from their patterns and predictability. But if any one thread bears too much, or is handled too roughly, or met with too sharp a tool, it will break and the collective functionality breaks down. One connection in a net breaks and all the fish escape through the same hole. When a net breaks, we tend to mending the net. We reassemble the pieces in hand, attempt to match the pattern, and smooth the mending back into the hole. And yet, each time we mend it, the thread with which we make the repair gets shorter or risks fraying. So nets are cast with skill, care, and attention to where and how they've been handled in anticipation of being cast, and care for where they're going. In our first year and a half of organizing relief, our net work has concentrated on testing materials, learning different ways to make knots, deliberately building up our patterns, and tending to the broken linkages when we need to. Every new member is a celebration. Every new linkage makes the net and makes it stronger, wider, and more able to do our work. And yet, if not treated carefully and handled mindfully, to know how to fold it and to know its reach when it unfurls, it becomes ungainly and of limited use. We all have our blind spots and biases and areas to grow and learn and to become more expansive and inclusive. So in this sense, our incredible organizing squad is often met with capacity limits of organizing for relief on top of all of our day jobs. And when we think about interlacing our efforts with existing organizations and networks, we offer some of these invitations and honestly also a request for patience. We warmly welcome new members, and there are many ways for folks to support relief outside of membership and get involved as really great neighbors. A few invitations that we might offer our white-led organizational partners at this moment are to steadily build relationships on an individual basis, and also to gracefully accept communications around boundaries. As an educator, as a parent of a 4- and a 6-year-old, I can appreciate, in the middle of a pandemic, I can appreciate that clear is kind, and reciprocally accepting clearly communicated boundaries with grace is a kindness and a wonderful first step toward trust, so long as we turn toward each other in the times of discomfort, even just to acknowledge the discomfort and then commit to turning back when the time is right. Relief can receive monetary donations via check. There are some details on our website, and you can help us spread the word within your networks about membership opportunities to BIPOC far and wide. You can also work on the many initiatives that impact all of us, our wholeness and our human dignity, that build toward our collective values, providing equity through the foundation of our society, healthcare, police accountability, affordable housing, universal access and design around disability, and so much more. We can all work too on our imaginations and check in on the stories that we tell ourselves about this place and its people, and to commit to learning and growing together, to listening, to celebrating our joys, and to committing to our collective, just future, all of us together. Thank you.
Wow, yeah, thank you, Megan. So many, I feel like I need to write down so many just wonderful insights and messages there. Really, really powerful. Thank you so much. And I'm sure there will be some great follow-up questions and conversations around many of the points that you were making. Really appreciate that. Whew. Yeah, I feel like I had to take actually a pause here. Okay, so yes, thank you so much. That was just really, really, really great. And with that now, we're going to make the transition over to Kyle Phillip of the Regenerative Food Network down in Southern Vermont. I always enjoy personally hearing about what's happening in the southern part of the state, being from there, and so there's a lot going on, which Kyle is going to be talking about. And so, Kyle, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jake. And so I get the unenviable task of having to follow up with Alyssa and Stephen and Megan, who said all of those things much better than I can. So I will share my screen. Okay.
We're seeing, Kyle,
You're seeing the whole thing.
the presentation mode. Yeah.
Yes, I do not want that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I tested this because I had a similar thing, and if you have, I don't know if you have two screens, but you can also choose the slideshow to show while still having your presenter notes up there.
Okay. Is that
That
better?
looks great. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So what we're building is really a network to help support all of the great work that people like Alyssa and Stephen and Megan and their groups are doing. And so what our background is, coming from the investment banking and finance world, and more recently renewable energy project development. And so when we look at the food system, we see all of those amazing opportunities that Stephen was talking about. We do think that a food system, a good food system done the right way, is the best way that we can help with climate change, with social justice issues, and with economic development issues, rural economic development specifically. We think if you're looking at broad agreements like the Paris Climate Accords or the Sustainable Development Goals, right, one of the best ways to get there is to focus on those direct innovations that we can do, led by people like Stephen on the ground, where that real impact is driven. And so what we're trying to do is put together a structure that allows us to support those people and provide them the finance, infrastructure, and technology that they need. And so since the others have done such a good job of explaining regenerative, I'll just skip to what we see as a good food system. And I think it has all of those elements that you were talking about. We have to understand, the regenerative organic practices, at the beginning, because those can promote healthy soils, right? That ensures animal welfare, that delivers healthy food. Those impacts are where everything starts. But then you have to have the processing and the system as well. So that's where we've focused a lot of efforts on, is one of the things we found is that there just wasn't enough meat processing capability specifically, because we really do believe that integrating animals back into the landscape is the best way to create that land regeneration. So we've been focused on standing up some more local infrastructure in southern Vermont that would help support meat processing, so give access to small and medium scale farmers for those types of opportunities. And then also think about doing those in the right way. What are the ways we can use renewable energy? What are the ways we could incorporate electric vehicles for transport and distribution, so that you're thinking about holistically the aspects of the system in all of those areas, not just the individual pieces, because we do see this whole thing as a big network coming together as well. And we think that the key piece that's been missing in the industrial food system is everything is concentrated and scaled way beyond, the appropriate scale for that, infrastructure, that region, that farm. And it also avoids all of those hard conversations, right? All of the things about, climate or racial justice, those are all externalities. Those are all just pushed aside and not captured inside the system. So if we can create those three pillars and really have a regenerative and organic production at the base, sustainable distributed processing in the middle, to make sure that infrastructure and that wealth and that access is shared with as many people as possible, and then focus on equitable distribution of that on the other side. We need to not just build a food system that can sell high-end regenerative food to people in the cities that can afford it. We need to make sure that people in the areas where we're growing this food also have access to good, healthy food. And that's a huge task to try and undertake. So we're by no means saying that we're doing all of this. We're saying this is what we believe, the tenets of a good food system are. And we love to work with as many partners as we can inside that system to try and, create real instances that showcase that. So the first thing that we're doing is, well, this just gives you a good example of how many people are involved just in trying to work together on our first project, which is building a regenerative food center in Bennington at an old warehouse building there. And Jake, we had a video for that. I don't know if they could play that. Can we try and do that?
Yes, Cindy, do you have roll the tape? Can you roll the tape?
I thought
I'm sorry,
this
I
was
actually
about-
don't have the video.
Okay, I may have.
Okay.
Hold
Then
on,
I'll-
I can help out in that area. I think you may not have been CC'd on that, Cindy.
And I could play it as well if there's
Yeah,
a way to make
yeah.
sure the audio comes through. But last time I tried it, it played on my computer and was trying to feed back through the speaker.
Oh, yeah.
Really
Yep,
worked.
so Kyle, I can walk you through that.
Okay. Great.
So
will
when
stop
stop sharing
this.
that
Yeah.
one. Now, when you click screen share,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see the bottom left-hand corner, there's two little boxes.
Share sound.
Yep, you want to check both of
Optimize for video
those.
clip. Okay. Got it. Okay.
At a community scale, we can do this. It's always been, you can individually change a light bulb, and that's great. You can wait for the federal government to come up with, mandates or whatever, and that's too late. But somewhere in the middle is the community taking action, and to me, that's what this is. The food center that we will be building out in Bennington, there'll be meat processing, there'll be refrigeration, there'll be commercial kitchens. In order to support the farmers and help them to do what they do best, which is farming, we said, let's come in with the processing. So that's really how this whole thing has come about.
The Southern Vermont Regional Food System really came together as an outgrowth of a grant that we received here at the center at Bennington College for addressing food insecurity.
My name is Tatiana Badamarco, and I teach food studies at Bennington College in Bennington, Vermont. We worked with the local health department who asked us to complete what's called a market basket study. And what we found was that in downtown Bennington, which is the area of most concentrated poverty in Bennington County, that food was less accessible and also it was more expensive when it was available. And this is what the USDA would call a food desert. And that was a big catalyst for the community conversation around the need for a food hub.
The Southern Vermont Regional Food Center can be the home of a future Bennington food hub. At the warehouse in Shields Drive, that really gives us the scale and scope to build out, some of the key missing pieces of the food system for the Bennington community and for the food system in Southern Vermont. That's again something that we believe is missing through all our work in the Regional Food Systems Group, that you need a central facility that can support all the community activity.
One of the things I love is trying to create something new. To see farms that have limitations right now and they really want to create something new and they want to expand their market, or they want to, create a system that they don't have already, and they need some help doing it. And I love trying to see if we can make that happen. The network exists already. The farmers know the hospital. The hospital workers know the farmers. They've already connected. They need somebody to handle those logistics for them. And if we can figure that out, then we can create opportunities, hopefully, for the farmers also.
And the hope is that the Southshire Regenerative Food Center, this food hub, will become a place where farmers can find a reliable market for their goods. We believe that it's possible to create a local food system in which farmers are supported in their livelihoods, they're able to expand production in sustainable ways, find markets for their food, and that food can be accessible to everyone. My vision for Bennington's food system in some ways is looking back to what the food systems of Vermont and rural areas used to be. A farming community, but one that's socially just and diverse.
It feels like Bennington literally is going to go from having hardly anything when it comes to a local food system to the possibilities of having a model that would even be regional. To me, that's like the great opportunity.
Okay. So I think it's nice to see and hear from the broader team, so that people see that it takes that many people in a community, and that also just shows 5 of the 50 people that we have to work with to get a project like that off the ground. And also only one of the projects, that's sort of the central facility that we see coordinating everything in this network and really focusing that activity around what we need in Southern Vermont. But there's a series of distributed slaughter facilities that are part of that. We're running one in Wilmington, Vermont right now. It's a USDA meat and poultry facility. We also are helping stand up a business called Vermont Natural Sheepskins that really focuses on value-added products and reducing waste in that system and giving farmers additional income for their animals. And then the last piece that we're really focused on is how do we get farmers paid for how they grow and their stewardship of the land, not just paid for what they grow. So we really think that ultimately, to unlock that system the right way, we have to bring in all of those externalities that aren't priced into the current food system. But just to give you a sense of the magnitude of that, there have been studies done where the current food system creates $12 trillion a year annually in negative externalities, climate and health mostly. And those costs outweigh the entire GDP of the food sector, agricultural sector. So it's currently running at a net negative process. So anything we can do to really empower individual farmers, small and medium scale farmers, in a network that gives them that access and that ability to do the great work that they're doing, and also to what Stephen and Alyssa and Megan were talking about, gives them a payment for those other aspects, right? Brings in economics to compensate people for for providing those social and ecological impacts. So we're working with a variety of financial institutions right now that have and are developing new systems for bringing that money into the food system, and we're trying to create the right projects that tie those together in Vermont. So, for instance, we did have the Dartmouth people out measuring a couple of our farms for soil health, and we're also working with the Savory Institute. It's one of our main partners, Jesse McDougall, is a Savory influencer hub in Vermont, and we were also working with Stonewall Farm to do they did the measurements, their ecological outcome verification measurements on some of our farms in our network. And we were also working with a company called Hudson Carbon that does 100 centimeter depth soil cores, and also has some of the technology to measure the above ground biomass, as well as the CO2 and methane flux in and out of those systems. So we care a lot about those things, and are happy to collaborate with as many people as we can to share that data and information as well. So we're leave it with so we'll make sure Helen still has some time as well. We're always looking for new opportunities, and managed to actually collaborate with Helen yesterday on a project we're working on to try and bring the healthcare to southern Vermont as well. So we love this kind of a network, and we look to work with more of you going forward.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Kyle. I'm loving the threads that are moving between the presentations, and as Kyle said already, he and Helen were able to connect yesterday on some things, and that always gives me a great level of joy to see sort of that networking happening just in putting a panel together. So it's really great to see that happening. These new relationships already forming kind of in this new iteration of the network. And so with that, Helen has said she is the closer of all closers. She can keep it under time so that we have time for Q&A before we go to breakout tables. So Helen, no pressure, and also has the task of always trying to explain the healthcare system to groups of people who, speaking for myself, find that to be an impenetrable system to understand. But Helen, I've seen her present before and does a wonderful job of making that accessible. So we're really happy to have her here and describing some of these interconnections that are happening through her work with food access and healthcare. So Helen, thank you so much, and it's all yours.
Great, thank you. And to be clear, I did not say that I was good at being super short. I said I would set a timer and stop when it went off. That is what I promised. So let's see if we can start off at least with getting the screen share to work appropriately. This is always the most nerve-wracking element. And hopefully that's working.
Yep, looks great.
All right. Timer has started. So I'm Helen Laban, and I work with Bi-State Primary Care Association. I run the Food Access and Healthcare Consortium, and I'm going to not talk that much about our specifics. You can see on the slide who's part of that consortium, and there will be links at the end to find out lots of details if you are interested in them. The topic assigned to me by Jake was to talk about building structures for effective collaboration between healthcare and the food system. So that's what I'll be talking about. And just to quickly clarify, I am not talking about food service at hospitals. There's many robust projects in that area going on in Vermont and elsewhere, and we're working in complement to those programs, but those aren't what I'm talking about here today. So to start, I think when I look at a project, I find it easiest to think across three overlapping categories of food security, community health, and individual health care. And these are categories for activities or projects within an organization. Usually they're working across all of these, but I find that in these different areas tend to be natural clustering of funding sources, regulations, skill sets in these different areas. And I'll show a couple of really simple examples of how that could play out when you're approaching a healthcare related problem. So looking at food security and community health, we could say that food security means we have enough food available for basic daily calorie requirements. Moving towards the health side, we could also say that food available includes 3 to 5 daily servings of vegetables, which, by the way, food production in the US does not. And then going further into community health, the observation of helping people eat 3 to 5 servings of vegetables a day, which overall supports better health. And within an organization like USDA, for example, we would anticipate all of these things happening, but it might be different staff or different budget lines going into different projects across this range. And then we add in individual health care. And so here, there's an emphasis on that individual part of it, right? The question is not, is kale healthy in general, but is kale the right thing for this patient, given their history and personal health goals? Kale may not be the answer. This individual may be eating plenty of kale. Kale isn't the problem. Something else is the answer. So just to go through a slightly less silly example, looking at individual healthcare and community health. So here's a common setup, and forgive me, I am not a clinician. So if there's anyone with clinical expertise in the crowd, just bear with me on this one. But we can look at an incidence of type 2 diabetes and looking at a goal to have both diet change and medication involved in reducing A1C levels for that patient. And embedded in here, there are a lot of different elements, right? First, those A1C levels, so that's a measure of blood glucose. You want them below a certain level to be considered having controlled type 2 diabetes, and even further down than that would be not having type 2 diabetes. So we are having here a element of monitoring, a clinical monitoring. We have diet change that's combined with medication adjustment. If you're using insulin to manage A1C levels and make a dietary change to bring that into play to manage A1C, you got to adjust the insulin, right? You can't just go it alone. There's actual clinical expertise that's needed to make that successful for a patient. You can transition from that intensive treatment period into long-term dietary change. Now we're moving towards the community health sphere. And then this also illustrates how when we look at community health, which in the example was people eating vegetables, maybe reducing sugar and some forms of carbohydrates, that's often spoken in terms of prevention, moving upstream into preventing poor health outcomes, but we should also be thinking about that in terms of maintenance, right? Someone has been through an intensive treatment period, and now they're maintaining those healthy dietary patterns, again, to meet their personal health goals, whatever those goals might be. So that would be an example of moving across, starting from a healthcare space. We can also look at where all three areas overlap. Plenty of examples of this. Here's a common one that we see happening a lot. There's a food insecurity screening at a healthcare practice. Many of you probably have been asked the hunger vital sign questions as a new patient or at an annual wellness visit. If that is a positive screen, there'll be a referral through to community resources to help with food security. And then we could say that we have a goal of the food provided through those community locations will be healthy and local food available. So we have some projects that encompass all three areas. Now, looking at this framework of categories, there's lots of different directions we can go. The particular direction that I am going to go is how we then tackle the challenge of bringing together technical expertise that's across different sectors. So this is a nice bookend to what Alyssa was talking about, which was bringing together technical expertise that's in the same general sector. And now we're looking broader than that. And there's lots of different areas that get invoked when you're looking at this overlap of food security, community health, and individual health care. So how do we start to get folks working together effectively towards common goals? And the answer is not going to be that everyone becomes an expert in everything. It's all fun and games until someone needs to learn medical billing and coding procedures, right? So this is not going to be the answer. We need a different solution to having folks stop. And I'm going to say that the solution does not begin with eliminating acronyms. Here on the screen, we have a statement about a CMS 1115 waiver, the top one with the acronyms, the bottom one with those acronyms all spelled out for you. I would argue that spelling it out does not elucidate anything. And in fact, it makes everything worse. That's much more confusing. And it obscures the important elements of that first statement. All that 95% of people need to know is that there is an entity called CMS, which is offering a waiver to a state. Anytime CMS offers a waiver to a state, that is federal healthcare policy. All you got to do then is find someone who knows about federal healthcare policy to be able to translate. And that person is going to need those technical terms in there, because without the technical terms, they don't know what the issue is, right? We have to get fairly specific and technical so that the person with the correct skill set, A, so you know what language we're speaking and you can get folks with the correct skill set, and B, so that that person then actually knows what the issue is. And so I'll give some examples of how we can proactively embrace technical terminology to bring the right people to the table to work on projects. So here's an example of, this is a reply I got from a large employer self-funded insurance plan on why they were not going to cover produce prescriptions. I expected to get shot down on this one. Their reason was, we won't consider covering produce prescriptions as a medical benefit because we're focused on core cost drivers. That is a statement that is simplified to the point of being untrue. This was a commercial insurance plan. They deal in trying to get as close to statistical averages as possible. That's the name of the game for commercial insurance. They do not want outliers. They want to be very, very average. So we, as people who aren't privy to their specific contracts, we can look at general healthcare data and know that unless they had a very weird pool of covered lives within that insurance policy, diet-related conditions are in fact going to be a core cost driver. That is just true across the adult population in the US. A more effective reason to say no. So if you want to say no better, here, I've got a whole list of reasons why any insurance plan might have said no to that request. And you can see embedded in these some useful specific language. If it's a non-standard medical benefit, and we need an actuarially sound framework for designing it that complies with federal and state regulations, I don't necessarily know how to do that myself, but I know I need an actuary or somebody who works with actuaries, and I know someone who works with legal systems and regulations needs to be at the table, right? Or going down a couple, if we need a new service to be at scale so that all beneficiaries can access a food program that's at scale, Farm to Plate is full of folks who know how to bring a local food program to scale. We can call up one of them and bring them to the table. So by flagging specific reasons why, that correlates to individuals who will know what to do with that information and help us bring them all together. It also goes the other direction, right? So healthcare should pay for food like medicine is something that we heard said a lot. All right, so in my categories, oh, the timer went off and this is my last slide. See, I am right on time. In my categories, we talked about, this would be in the healthcare section, right? It says healthcare right there and it's paying for a medicine. But what specifically does that actually mean to you, to everyone who's here? I'm going to pause for the count of 5, because this is really the last point I'm going to make, to let you all think through what specifically that statement would mean. So these are questions that healthcare might ask if we were taking that literally. And some programs do mean this literally. Medically tailored meals at a national level, they really do mean that they want that to be paid for as if it were pharmaceuticals. So they have a Medicare pricing structure and all the rest. Other times, right, we're not putting baskets full of statins and Adderall out for anyone to take in healthcare practice lobbies. We know that sometimes it's being used entirely metaphorically. It's not being used as if it were a pharmaceutical prescription. And there are many programs that are in between. And then this list here is just questions. They aren't answers. The bigger point is to be specific in what we are asking for. And from there, we can begin to have meaningful conversations. And again, with everyone who we need to have at the table at that table. So that is the end of my presentation. Here are a couple of links if you want to find out more about our specific program. The top one is a website that has lots of links to resources. And the bottom is a podcast that is admittedly more fun than the website. So I will stop my screen share and my presentation. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Helen. I feel so enlightened and so many really great points about that need to be specific in these instances. I think that's really essential. And thank you. So just a big applause for all of our panelists. I'm like truly amazed in the work that you all are doing, and also just the breadth and scope of what we've covered here in a very short period of time. So tremendous thank you. I really do. I sort of want to clap out loud. So thank you so much. And yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it. Come on. Woo! Not to be so staid and formal here in this virtual world. All right. So with that, we have a good 15 minutes for some real Q&A and discussion and back and forth with our panelists. And then we also will have some dedicated breakout tables where folks can just have more time to, in smaller groups, share reflections and ask questions and that kind of thing. So if you can raise your hand, if you have a question, and I can then identify you and you can unmute and ask the question, or if you want to write the question in the chat and post it, that's fine. And I'll also call on you in that way to ask the question. So I will be looking out now for people who have questions. And maybe there are some questions already in the chat.
Eric and Erica were just demonstrating the utility of being specific in our questions and getting the specific answer that you need in the chat. But thank you for backing me up, you two.
Good modeling. 1 second. Let me.
Jake, a question came in earlier for Alyssa. And I apologize, I don't know if she typed any answers, but the question is, what efforts are being made to align data and the analysis with the Vermont Payment for Ecosystem Services and Soil Health Working Group and the Climate Smart Ag, I just lost it, Smart Ag provisioning in existing federal legislation like ARPA and bipartisan infrastructure, as well as pending like Build Back Better that expects a House vote this week? Get all that?
Yeah, so a couple things there. The first part is easier. So I actually, another project that I'm working on, where the technical service contract for the Vermont PES working group, Payment for Ecosystem Services working group. And so we are really directly connecting the research that we're doing on soil health with the Payment for Ecosystem Services program. And I'm just lucky to kind of be in both boats and facilitate that. The second piece, I'm less have been less connected. I don't know that I've been looped into specific programs from that funding. I know that there will be ARPA funding related to some of the climate action work in the state, but I don't know that any specific projects related to that. Maybe others do.
And I think Erica Campbell was responding to that portion in the chat. So Erica, do you want to just respond to that to the full group here?
Sure. Although I don't really have much more to add than what I put in the chat there. So I mean,
I just want to make sure that people hear it.
yeah. So basically, if we pass if Congress passes Build Back Better, there will be a big bump in funding for NRCS programs, EQIP, CSP, and some others. And I just noted that, we haven't really historically used the Conservation Stewardship Program a ton in Vermont. I don't know if there's anyone from NRCS here that knows more about this, but it is a great program. So hopefully that money will infuse into these projects where farmers can actually, use CSPS funds to support their work on farms to improve their soil health and other outcomes on their farms. So I think, and then there's also a research bump. It's not nearly as much as there was hope that the funding was meant to be, but it should provide sort of, funding for like exactly what Alyssa and Heather Darby are doing and whatnot. So, and then the infrastructure bill doesn't really have a ton of ag related provisions, but we'll have a lot of other things for rural America.
And this is a great plug for the network-wide exchange that will be on December 16th, because we will have congressional staff there to answer more of these types of questions, and hopefully the legislation will be further along so they can answer with more specificity. And so I want to go to Bruce Hennessy. Bruce, there may have been a couple questions that you posted in the chat, and I just want to make sure that you can get those out there to the group and see what panelists can respond to it. So go ahead.
Sure. They were probably basically the same question. I am a farmer in Richmond, Vermont, pasture-based livestock and USDA processing. And I really, I guess what I'm looking for is where does the political will come from, and what are our plans for gaining political will for things that will seem to people to be maybe a heavy lift on the political side, particularly, I mean, I think most people view our products, because they're much more expensive than conventional products, as being, it's quite a privilege to be able to buy them because they're very expensive, right? Compared to the standard conventional food that they can buy. So how do we get to that point where everything is accessible to all, and it's not accessible on the backs of poorly paid or underpaid farm workers and farmers overall? And so I'm wondering, I mean, these are all tremendous ideas and we're 100% behind it, but how do we get the entire society to support this?
Yeah, Kyle, go ahead. I was gonna say, who wants to step into
so
that?
What we're finding is there are a lot of private capital sources that are looking to provide some of those fill some of those gaps, and so we're seeing a lot more progress there than we are on the regulatory side or government side. But it's because they believe there is a backdrop that will ultimately get there, that people will start recognizing that the need to measure beyond just financial capital, and that you'll have to look at ecological asset value and social asset value alongside that. And so what we're focusing on is working with those investors that have been traditional like ESG, environmental and social governance investors that have put large amounts of capital into things they think are trying to drive those impacts, but have not been very successful doing so. If you know the amount of money that's gone into investments that are supposed to solve those problems is you know trillions of dollars, and arguably all the problems are getting worse over the last 20 years. But there are people that are willing to move capital into programs that pay farmers directly for those impacts. There are people that are willing to move money into programs that sponsor or support food access for good food like that to people who can't get it. So I think we're working on trying to fill those gaps while the broader policy things come together in the background. But it also does look like, coming out of the conversations that they just had in Glasgow, that there will be more support for that internationally, and more support for that coming in some of these other infrastructure bills that people were mentioning as well.
Great, thanks for that, Kyle. And Stephen, Leslie, I saw you unmuted, so I'm gonna let you have a chance to take a crack at it.
Okay, thanks, Jake. So a couple of the ideas that some of the folks who have been working as advisors to the Payment for Ecosystems Working Group, particularly some of the farmer input that has been being proposed, does look at CSP as a great basis to build on. On our farm, we went through 10 years of the EQIP program with the NRCS and then qualified for CSP. And it has been a tremendous boon for us, really helped us to do adaptive rotational grazing management and a lot of other improvements, and now moving into silvopasture on our farm. No, I think we were the smallest dairy farm to qualify for EQIP in the state, and ended up being recognized as Farm of the Year by the NRCS in 2017, I think it was, or 2018. And I think we were kind of an example of seeing how EQIP oftentimes is criticized for maybe being more of a Band-Aid and patching, propping up a struggling commercial dairy farm system in our state that is tending towards consolidation and larger and perhaps less regenerative practices as it does that. So I think we're really an example of how applying these same programs to a small farm that is very consciously trying to apply the soil health principles and become a truly regenerative farm, that it can work to scale. And I think that's a big part of what us in the organic regenerative movement really focus on, is the human scale of the type of farming systems we think are going to be more resilient going forward. I think we also have to maybe step back and without being trying to fear monger or in any other way be a prophet of doom here. I do think that it's quite realistic to understand that the rate of soil loss that's occurring in the breadbasket of the United States and the other breadbasket areas of the world, at as much as 5 tons per acre in Iowa currently, and the contamination of the soil that continues, along with the aridification of the West, predictions that the Central Valley will be desertified in 10 years, that these kinds of shocks that are coming our way over the next decade are going to really throw us more onto a localized food system, like or not. And so I think the work we're doing now is going to be really excellent in preparing us to be more adaptive to these kinds of shocks that are already occurring. I mean, we're already experiencing these things now. And I think we're poised in the Northeast to be more resilient. And I think we're also thereby going to be receiving a lot of climate refugees. Many of the people who are already working undocumented on our dairy farms are indeed climate refugees from the highlands of Central America and desertifying areas of Mexico. And how do we understand that these people are coming in many cases with thousands of years of indigenous wisdom, farming skills, tremendous human resource that will be coming to us, because any of us will move if there's no food or water where we have traditionally lived. So I really see that the type of intensive management that we're trying to practice on our farm will provide opportunity for many, many more people to be involved in farming. And I think many of the young and new farmers that will be coming to us will be coming as a result of having to leave where they are now. As we know, Bill McKibben has stated very eloquently about the iron law of climate change, that those who have contributed the least to the problem are the ones being most impacted now. So just some thoughts there.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Wow, I'm just, I'm continually amazed right now by the depth of this conversation and the wonderful knowledge that is on our panel. And Megan, I want to make sure that I also capture this question that's coming from Lisa Maze. So she asked, actually, Lisa, I'll turn to you, Lisa. Ask the question directly. I don't need to speak for you.
Thanks, Jake. Yeah, absolutely. Megan, I so appreciated what you shared and just wanted to hear you speak to some examples of what white-led organizations in Vermont can do, you know, community groups, institutions as well, to uplift folks of color, Black and Indigenous in Vermont.
Sure, I'm grateful for the question. Happy to speak to it a little bit. But I was thinking about the narrative. Sometimes Liv will do an imagination exercise, and she asks folks if you're comfortable to close your eyes and imagine a perfect Vermont day, and imagine an open agricultural farm field and a picturesque Vermont barn, and the farmer walks out of the barn. And what do they look like? And they probably don't look like me or Liv. And so, you know, one of the things that I think is just really powerful, we all have our own personal work to do in terms of reconciling what we have learned and been socialized to understand with realities, different realities, and we all have work to do around being able to grapple with many complex realities that are all true at the same time. And if we are limited just by a failure of imagination, like, oh, that's cool, that's easy to shift, to be able to think more creatively and shift the way that we see each other, value our contributions, honor expertise, and then to think about how that informs micro details like hiring policies, and when we review a resume, how do we read names, or how do we solicit applications through a Google form that can be anonymized, or how do we offer opportunities for folks to showcase skills that really directly contribute to the work and not just to what's written on paper. I think about all of our personal work, you know, who are we reading? Who are the books about? Who are they by? I think about it a lot with my little kids and just the world that they see and the messages that are just embedded into everything that's in their world. And then I really think it's not just about our failure of imagination, but it's also about really radically thinking about, not from a scarcity mindset, but from an abundance and a generosity, knowing that generosity is so generative, perspective of really actively thinking about how we hold power and how we can share it. That lifts everybody up. And I think that happens, Lisa, in, I think the really subtle ways are just as important as the big statements and the big picture thinking, but we've got to do it all at the same time. I don't know if that's too general, but thanks for the question.